Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we are talking with Dominion Energy about their community work here in the Northern Virginia area and across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Joining me is a regional director with Dominion Energy, Deborah Tompkins Johnson. Thank you so much for being here, Deborah.
I keep that Tompkins in there.
I know, you have those long names, right? But I understand, you know.
Yeah.
Tompkins, you were probably originally a Tompkins.
That's right, absolutely.
So, you know, people think of Dominion Energy, and we admire the fact that you keep our lights on.
Thank you.
And get them back on.
Yes.
But Dominion, which is an enormous organization serving the Commonwealth of Virginia, also reinvests back into the communities where you provide electricity and where you employ a lot of people. So talk a little bit about the Community Foundation and, you know, the work that you're doing.
Right, so good. So thank you for asking that, and thank you for having us here. I really, really do appreciate that. So the way I think about it is, and the way we think about it and talk about it is, if you are a caring person or company, then you give.
Right.
So for us, the caring that we exemplify, because we have great employees, I have wonderful coworkers, so we were able to exemplify that by giving. So we all know that there's a corporate responsibility, a piece of that, but when I think about the people that I work with, right, and I'm so excited that I work with people who make electricity, who know how to work safely around electricity, but these are people who sometimes come to our department because they have an interest in a particular organization, school, or whatever, and so that's who we are. As you said, people think of us as the company that makes sure they have lights and heat and so forth, and of course we have major infrastructure projects as well. So people think about us in that vein, but we want people to know that we are regular people, loving people, caring people. You know, we are adult children, we have children, and so being a part of our community and giving back to our community, being involved it's important to Dominion Energy because that's what's important to Dominion Energy employees.
True, and I mean, you know, there's an old axiom: to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yes.
And so, because you are a large organization and you employ a lot of people and you are everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, the advocacy piece is of great interest to me because I've always felt that, because I serve on nonprofit boards, that when you have somebody who goes to their employer and says, this is the organization that I care about. I donate my time, I donate my money, I sit on their board. Does that help to guide you in some of the projects?
In some ways it does, because one of our sort of informal philosophies is that we do work towards having our dollars follow volunteer efforts. It's not that way all the time, but if we do have a large number of volunteers, or where we've had employee volunteers involved in an organization for a long time, then we work to support that organization. Sometimes we may not even know about the organization unless that employee brings it to us. And an example comes to mind, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So it's a program, Assistance League of Northern Virginia.
Yes, and I'm doing a show with them like next week.
And it really was coincidence that I just thought of that. So we have been working with them for, I guess, 7 or 8 years consistently. So members of our design engineering team learned of the organization. Their leadership team brought it to our committee that reviews grants, and so now, since then, every month that there is school, we have a group of about 30 plus employees who pack kits to go to schools. It's called Weekend Food for Kids. You don't even want to think about the fact that there's some kids that otherwise they wouldn't have food over the weekends. But you know, we're just happy that we've been involved with them for so long in doing the packing, and we help with the delivery to the now 7 schools throughout the region, including schools in Fairfax County. So people think of Fairfax County as sometimes we have the perception as a very privileged community,
very affluent
but
community.
you have people in Fairfax County too that do need help, and that's just one example of where employees came to us, and we have been able to continue to support them for
Well, they
many
give you
years.
all credit because you have volunteers and you offer facilities too. And
they pack at our regional headquarters
because
in Herndon.
that's an all-volunteer organization. My hat is off to all volunteer organizations because they really, without the volunteers, they would not be able to do the work.
That's right.
But you also need resources and funding. So you need a strong partner who can bring the things that you don't have.
Right.
And Dominion is really good about that. You have partnered and supported so many different organizations. Before the show, we were talking about the fact that Dominion is the sponsor of Equality Virginia's Commonwealth Dinner. You know, and even within Dominion, you don't necessarily know, you know, who brought that or what the connection was with that. But somebody advocated.
Yes, and that's fine. But I just also want people to know, and you know this, and I know this is something we said that we kind of wanted to talk about, is that you don't have to know someone within Dominion Energy to apply.
That's right. And in fact, I was, when I went on your website, which is dominionenergy.com/community, there's a big button right there that says that you can apply for a grant. So you don't necessarily have to know somebody in the organization to make your pitch. But you do have sort of 4 general areas that you're looking to invest in.
Right, yes. So, of course, environment, being an energy company, environment is very important to us. So that's the top, that's a priority area for us. Education. And we support education at all levels, early childhood, K through 12, higher ed, and even continuing education for adults. So we support education in all areas. Community vitality, we call it. So there we may have our diversity programs, our cultural arts programs, and then there's health, medical, human needs, and so health, medical, housing, food assistance, those come under the human needs area. So those are our major categories for giving, and within those would be veterans. Veterans is a very important initiative for us, and we can, you can find different ways to support veterans depending on what the organization is doing.
There's a lot of organizations, and I believe I'm right in saying that Virginia has the 2nd largest population of veterans, only second to California, in the United States.
Yes.
Lots of veterans here in Virginia.
Absolutely. And so we know that because of what we're around, right? The Pentagon and several military bases here. And so, yes, there's several organizations that we support. And we're excited, again, to mention one in Fairfax is Operation Renewed Hope Foundation. You may be, some of your viewers may be familiar with the assisted living facility that was on Route 1 in the Lorton, in the Lorton area, just south of Telegraph Road. So Fairfax County took ownership of that building a while ago, and now they are working with Operation Renewed Hope Foundation to either donate or to have them acquire it for a very nominal amount. So we've been really pleased to, and their effort is to end homelessness of veterans. So.
And Fairfax County has made a priority of that. There's even an office to prevent and end homelessness, which anytime you put resources and people on something, it shows your commitment to trying to eradicate it. And I think Fairfax County continues to work on that. But you bring up this other concept of public-private partnerships, and also Fairfax County has the Office of Public-Private Partnerships. And oftentimes you can get the public part right, but the private investment, elevates these efforts to a different level entirely.
So it does take both, and it is important to work together and to continue to collaborate, because in some cases, depending on what the project may be and what the need may be of the organization, they may need the public part first. Like when you're having a big capital ongoing, then the private companies want to say, okay, you want to make sure this is going to happen. And then sometimes you need to have the private part first so that our government knows that companies see this as a need, and so private companies are supporting that. So that's very, very important.
Well, you do a lot of different things. I'm kind of impressed. We were saying before the show that now that I have been connected with you, and Dominion as a foundation is on my radar, suddenly I've run into the Assistance League of Northern Virginia, and I've run into all these organizazations that are like, yes, and we work with Dominion. And I'm impressed at the variety. So the Virginia Opera, for instance. So they are one of the statewide organizations that we work with, and so they do a wonderful program. So we fund them from our corporate office, and so we give them funding, and then what they do is they bring programs to schools throughout the state. And so I think we'll see that there was one where we were in Fauquier County, but they had been up here in Fauquier County, Fairfax County, Alexandria, Arlington area, and then they bring the students into the auditorium and allow them to see the opera, and then can talk to the
participants, the performers, and learn more about that. And you never know where that's going to go from there. You never know who's going to spark an interest in a child and let them perhaps pursue that, or it just may, enrich their day. And all of that's good.
And another partnership is with Junior Achievement, which most people have heard of Junior Achievement. So some of the things you do are with smaller organizations, and some of them are with very well-known organizations.
And the Junior Achievement Finance Park was just a wonderful idea, and they've opening the one that we support is in Fairfax County, and so their main mission is that they make sure that every 8th grader in Fairfax County school systems comes through there, and they have an experience throughout the day where they have to. They're given a description of their livelihood, and then they have to create a budget for themselves or their family, depending on what description they are given for themselves. And so they have this beautiful facility where students come, and then they're kind of in awe because it's set up sort of as different storefronts. Right. And so students get to come there, and then they learn how to finance, finance for their future. They're 8th graders at the time, but it's a bit of an eye-opener. And so I think it's also ingenious also that Junior Achievement is able to extend beyond that. So they're able to so while they're committed to 8th graders throughout Fairfax County Public Schools, students are also able to come from Alexandria, Arlington, I think Loudoun, and DC. And they've opened another facility across the Potomac, I think in Maryland, and then they recently opened one in Richmond, Virginia as well, and we supported that one as well.
Financial literacy is so important that they actually passed legislation to make sure it was added to the curriculum in high school.
Yes.
But it's never too early to start teaching the fundamentals of how money works, because money is required for everything that you do in this world. So, again, Junior Achievement is something that so many people are familiar with.
And they have a giving component. One of their storefronts relates to giving back to your community. So you'd be glad to know that.
Well, see, that is great because philanthropy and charitable giving is not necessarily something that comes naturally to people, especially when you have limited means, although I believe that research has shown that people of modest means actually give quite a large percentage of their income, and that could be the church tithing, or it could be volunteering and doing in-kind kind of things, but everybody always has something that they can give, and I think embedding that philosophy of giving back as part of financial literacy is ingenious.
So they have that covered. So
so in the next segment we're going to bring on Nini Spivey. She is with the Children's Science Center, and that's going to be an opportunity for you to talk about that collaboration with her.
Excited to have Nini here.
I know, and
she's got good news.
And we've got huge news, huge news. So I hope that everybody will join us after this break. We are going to be talking with Nini Spivey of the Children's Science Center, as well as Deborah Tompkins Johnson of Dominion Energy.
Hi. Patience. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try.
Only you.
Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist.
Use STEM to build, create,
She did it.
and change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today we are talking with a representative from Dominion Energy, and also joining us in this segment is Nini Spivey. She is the Executive Director of the Children's Science Center, temporarily located in the Fair Oaks Mall. Thank you so much for being here, Nini and Deborah.
Happy to be here.
So I say temporarily because you've been there for a while, and people may not have even known that there was the Children's Science Center in Fair Oaks. But you are just about to make a big leap. So tell us a little bit about where you've been since 2010, which is when you joined the Science Center as the Executive Director, and where you're going.
Oh, wonderful. I first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, and what a pleasure it is to be able to speak with you today and share the story, our mission, our vision, where we've been, where we're going. My journey started with the Science Center actually 14 years ago, before I was on the board of the Children's Science Center, but I was a member of the board of the Junior League of Northern Virginia.
Oh, right.
And the Junior League of Northern Virginia is a founding partner of the Children's Science Center. And so we got started pretty much at the beginning, and later I went on to begin to lead the organization in 2010. And we had to, as an organization, survive the Great Recession. It was sort of a tricky time. Certainly finding property, finding a building or land to be donated in Northern Virginia is not easy.
It's very expensive here.
And so, faced with the challenges in 2010 of finding our walls, needing walls, we really said, and this is really a lesson I learned from the Junior League, we have to lead with the mission. We can deliver this mission, at least initially, without walls. And so we really got serious about being what we call a museum without walls. And we did a lot of, and still do a lot of, community outreach. And we go to schools all across the region, every single jurisdiction. And we built this program back in 2010, and then we went on to open our first operating site at Fair Oaks Mall, the Children's Science Center Lab, almost 4 years ago. And yes, we've got some big plans for the future. We have donated land out in the Dulles area on Route 28, and I look forward to sharing a little more about what that is going to make possible for our community, our region, our children, and even folks that are a little older now. The big kids get to go.
The big kids. So at what point did you partner with Dominion? How did Dominion get wrapped into this piece?
Dominion, I feel like has been a partner for such a long time. Definitely when we were a museum without walls. They were really one of the first corporations that really noticed us and believed in what we were trying to accomplish, and sort of rallied around us. So I value that partnership very much.
Well, I'd say, Deborah, it was a good investment. What do you think?
It's been a great investment, and we look forward to continuing to support them. We're so excited. Nini and her team are just wonderful to work with. We talked a little bit earlier about employees. That just one way that we learn about organizations. So Tim Sargent was one who was telling us about the Children's Science Center, and then opening the lab at Fair Oaks Mall. And Tim is on the Planning Commission in Fairfax County. And so anyway, it's just grown. It's grown from there. And I'll just say really briefly, because I want Nini to be able to talk, is that they hit all the marks for us, right? It's youth, it's science, it's education, it's parents, it's outreach. So the Children's Science Center Lab and the work that they're doing, I went to see them one night at one of the schools. Anyway, it's all good.
So, with the emphasis on STEM, and there is a huge emphasis, whether you call it STEM or STEAM,
Right.
and I've heard STEAM-H too.
Yeah.
So science, technology, engineering, art, math, and healthcare.
Yeah.
It's everything. But to emphasize that in your curriculum, to emphasize that as a direction we want students to go in, and not have a public resource, to not have accessibility for every child, to be able to have an experiential, that wouldn't really make sense. So it seems like you've got perfect timing. The recession was bad timing, but you are kind of riding this wave, I think, of people saying this is where the emphasis in education needs to be.
Yes. I think there's been a lot of excitement around STEM as we've grown up, and that certainly helped us. And interestingly, when we first got started, our initial reason was There's no children's museum in Northern Virginia. We have over 500,000 children. There's so many regions around the country, smaller and larger than ours, that have this resource. We're missing something vital. And the kids that are missing it most are the kids, unlike mine, who cannot travel to other cities for these experiences. So we said, okay, we want to create a children's museum. So in doing that, we listened to the community. And the community said, you need to focus on STEM. I think the acronym was even just forming back then,
Yeah, I know, right?
but it's really, you need to focus on science and engineering. You know, we're a technology community. Our workforce needs these skills. We need to get kids excited about this early. And so we really adjusted to more of a hybrid of a children's museum and a science center pretty early in our formative years. And that was because that's what our community needs.
I think it's great, you know, and experiential museums are very different too.
Yes.
You know, and I know we're going to talk later about the big kids, but when Tom and I were in Florence, Italy, we went to the Da Vinci Museum, and at first we couldn't find it. We kept going up and down the street. We're like, we were expecting some big museum. It was a storefront. Like, it was a storefront with retail things on either, and it was this small museum, but you go in and they've got Da Vinci's drawings, and then they've made all of these catapults and armor and all of these things, and you could crank and you could build, and it would tell you about the history behind. It was the best time we'd ever had, is actually pushing and pulling and cranking and hearing about and just understanding Da Vinci from that perspective.
Yes.
So I can tell you, big kids like that a lot.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and I'm glad to hear that in your future plans, that maybe the big kids will have more of a space.
Yeah, it's, well, certainly space is a challenge today. Our existing facility is, I would like to describe it as a modest suburban home. Our exhibit square footage is 2,700 square feet.
Oh,
we
that
have
is a
over
suburban.
50,000 people a year in that space.
Wow.
And would you invite 50,000 people
Not
a year
at
to
the
your
same
house?
time. Not even at the same time. Not even one at a time.
And
That's
then
a lot.
we serve another 20 to 25,000 visitors by our outreach, going to all jurisdictions across the region. So, however, we're just scratching the surface of the need in our area. And so we, for a long time, have known that we need a right-sized, full-sized museum for this awesome science center of the future. And this science center is particularly exciting because it will be the right size, first of all.
For something that
It'll be
large,
about,
for a region this large.
It'll be, I mean, on all matters of scale, about 10 times of what we have today. And so we're looking at about a 70,000 square foot facility. And what's also exciting is that our doors will be open to curious minds of all ages. So you and your husband are most
I know,
welcome.
I want to
most
come.
welcome.
I want to
and
come.
you are going to definitely be pushing and pulling and
cranking,
building
yeah.
and all of that. And there's so many fantastic possibilities. And we like to define STEM and science very broadly, the broad view of
Right.
science, because science is not a white lab coat.
No, it's not. You're so right.
Science is the world around us and better understanding that world. And we don't want to limit even the audience that what they identify with. Not everyone would consider themselves a science lover, but many would say they love to learn.
You know, it's kind of like electricity, for instance. It's kind of like we flip a switch and we're like, oh, look, the lights come on. But there's science behind that. And there's a history of science behind that. And the technology that will take us forward into the future. You know, we interact with science every day. We just don't think of it in our minds as science that we're interacting with.
Absolutely, and it's important not only to raise the next generation of scientists, engineers, but it's important to raise the next generation of citizenry to be able to better appreciate the world around them, to make those important decisions for our future. And so we take the responsibility broadly and seriously, but we have a lot of fun.
Well, you should have a lot of fun
at the same time.
So let's talk about your fan club. So you were in the right place at the right time, in that you got donated land in Dulles. So you're going to be in Loudoun County, and so part of your fan base was Senator Janet Howell.
Yes.
And Delegate David Reed.
Yes.
Because David is in that district. And,
Yes, it's in his district.
and Phyllis Randall.
Yes.
Chairman, whole different subject, Chairman
Right.
Phyllis Randall, right,
Yeah.
in Loudoun County, who ponied up with a commitment from Loudoun County.
Yes,
All
yes.
of these things came together to provide the much needed funding. Having land is one thing, having a commitment from the state legislature, from Loudoun County to say that we are in for all of it.
Yes.
That's exciting. Like, that's huge.
It's huge, and it's been a long time in the making. We've been working on this partnership for 3.5 years.
That's a long time.
And maybe even before that, if you consider, all things in. But we recognized pretty early on, once we got the land, we did a study to understand philanthropically what was needed to build a facility there. And pretty quickly we found out from the experts that this could not be done with a private fundraising effort alone, that we needed to develop a public-private partnership. And it's been really a beautiful story. It's been a beautiful story because we've had support from so many leaders across all aisles at the state and local level.
That's right.
And everybody has really done something that I've been waiting for a long time, which is, I always say we've been rolling this, 20-ton boulder up a hill. It's a huge undertaking. And for so long, I've been waiting for those sitting at the top of the hill, or maybe it's Everest, to pull the boulder up for us, because this would really make it a lot easier. And that really has happened in the last few years, but especially in the last month.
So next steps, groundbreaking, estimated date, rebranding to be more inclusive of everyone. So we're talking about 5 years, 10 years?
Oh yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, we're gonna get this done absolutely as fast as possible. But we do have a lot of partners, and there's a lot of steps in the process. And so the partners, we're working on what is that timeline that we can all get around and feel comfortable committing to. But the most immediate next steps include some really fun things. We will be selecting an architect, although we've already done a good bit of the preliminary architecture work, but there's a lot more, of course, architecture and engineering work that has to be done. And we'll be bringing on museum design. And of course, we've done some of that before already as well, but now it's time to get into the details of that process. So I like to say this is when things get really fun.
Well, and I think people can stay tuned because you've been really good about putting information on your website. And I think people can go to your website for updates as we move along. And I just want to say so much thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Nini. This has been so informative. I'm excited to have something of this magnitude to serve the children and other curious minds in Northern Virginia. And I hope that people at home will take part. I mean, try to understand what they can do to help your efforts, because all of us need to be behind, support, raise up what you're doing with the Children's Science Center, soon to be inclusive of all curious minds.
And I hope people will go and visit the lab now at Fair Oaks Hospital.
That's true.
It will just encourage them to support what Children's Science Center is doing.
We're having a lot of fun today. There's no need to wait.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And this is what you need to know.